Hi, I'm Wes Turow, Chief Marketing Officer with Extreme, and I'm going to be your MC over the next couple of days here at Extreme Connect. I'm really grateful to have you here with us. It's really going to be an exciting time over the next couple of days. I've got to start by first of all thanking Norman and Nabil for their keynotes. Norman, as our COO, has been at the very forefront of our digital transformation journey. And a lot of that work has really paid off in spades as he shared in his use cases for Extreme, whether you're a customer, whether you're a partner, whether you're a technology partner or an employee, as we've helped to do our part in fighting COVID and prepare for a post-COVID world. Nabil has been at the very forefront of our whole mission, which is to deliver an effortless experience, not just from a product or service standpoint, but your whole experience with Extreme, from the time you start seeking out a solution from us to the sale, post-sale experience. Nabil has been at the very front of that, and it's the right thing, never been more appropriate than it is in this environment to deliver an effortless experience. While you're here over the next couple of days, in the breakout sessions, there should not be a question that goes unanswered. We've got in the Q&A, in the chat box, live Q&A. So we've got a team of folks here ready to answer your questions. It will be a great event. I have the chance to kick off today's event with two terrific guests talking about the new normal and what things look like, not just today, but how technology and business decision makers should plan going forward. First, we're joined by Wall Street Journal best-selling author, Michael Gale, who's written a book called Digital Helix and is a frequent contributor to Forbes on the whole topic of digital transformation. He'll be joined by Camille Mendler of Omdia. Omdia is a very large international analyst firm, and Camille writes frequently not only the topic of digital transformation, but what's happening with the move to network as a service, what's happening with the move to 5G, and how these technology changes can really help us advance, and particularly advance in a post-COVID world. So with that, let's have some fun and let's get started. Michael, I'm going to start with you. Your book, Digital Helix, came out almost 2 years ago. What's changed in the last 2 years, and what's really happened as a result of the pandemic, and how has it changed the way decisions are made, both at the technology level, decision maker level, and the business decision maker level?
Yeah, it's great to be here. It's a really good question because typically I'd started the project back in 2013, which sort of seems like the last century. And the rate of change when you measured it was running at about 18% then of major corporations had sort of crossed that chasm. But between 2013 and 2017, that rate had actually slowed down. In fact, only about 11.2 or 0.4% were making that transition year to year. So if you think about it this way, it would still take another 10 or 11 years for every single one of the Global 2000 to have actually crossed that chasm. Pretty unlikely. You look at COVID. COVID has amplified the necessity for transformation. We're at home. Infrastructures have to go virtual. And so we just finished some work in the US and China. And what we found was what was this 11.2% change rate from year to year has actually elevated to 19%. It's not dramatic, but it's a 75% increase in speed. And COVID has amplified the speed of things and also opened up new windows. That means decisions, as Camille will go over, technologies, they've suddenly got a much wider lens for what needs to make a difference than I think we've ever seen before.
That's great. Camille, you have been at the very forefront of a lot of research coming out of COVID and how it changes the decision-making process. I'd really be interested in hearing your perspective and what you and your colleagues at Omdia are seeing.
Well, I was just thinking, you said in the post-COVID environment, we're still in it. We're not out yet. And about 60-70% of enterprises believe it's globally that it's going to be a U-shaped recovery, not the convenient V-shaped that many people wish it would be. We're still in the trough here. And it occurs to me that Michael's book, which I hope I'll get a signed copy of, by the way, has never been more relevant. The Digital Helix story, we need to live and breathe digital transformation. And in my firm, we survey about 6,000 enterprises a year, and we ask the same question every year about digital transformation. And I have to say that less than 10% say that their digital transformation is complete. And some of them are probably fibbing, I suspect. But I think we're sort of revisiting all of that right now. And new priorities are emerging, but I think a lot of it is confirmation of what needs to be done. Some uncomfortable truths, right, Michael? I mean, it's all been written down. What needs to be done? I think it's about execution now.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things is, Michael's book was a lot around customer experience and around operational efficiency, but I see a lot of your research lately, Camille, has been around just basic safety, data insights, how to unlock a lot of the information you have to make better use of your network, your IT tools to make better decisions in this environment. Share a
Okay,
little bit more about
absolutely.
that.
I mean, certainly, if we think about what are the priorities where expenditure is moving to in terms of this COVID environment, enterprises, number one on the list is security. No surprises there. Security has been a dominant problem for us all. But if you're shifting your entire business, your business processes, your digital transactions, your customers to a digital environment, you need to make sure it's a very secure environment. And then, of course, the tools, the collaboration tools have to work, right? And to do that, you need to have a very effective, high-performing network. So that's very high on the list too. But the priorities for businesses, it's less about preserving money, but delivering experience. We're moving to very much an experiential environment, and there's no tolerance for poor performance. And unfortunately, at least 40% of the enterprises I've spoken to recently, large, medium, and some very large enterprises, say, frankly, their current suppliers have not delivered the performance expected. And that's going to cause churn, change, and deservedly so, I think, in various areas.
That's an interesting view.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Michael, you do your podcast.
Yeah, so there's an interesting dynamic there. I think we're moving from gas car networks to electric car networks, and that often actually means new suppliers, because the need to have consistently on chargeable high torque performance is a requirement. It's not just a luxury anymore. You have to have it, right? 3% of the world used to work at home full time. Well, as of April, it was like 98%. We ain't going back to 3% again. And I think if you think about the podcast I did with Forbes about the futures in focus, 10 years out, I look at some of the interviews I did last year, and it's not that I cringe, but I'm like, these guys didn't stretch enough to where the world is going. We're going to see a really different world sort of grow very fast out of this, whether or not it's virtual infrastructure, self-service requirements, levels of performance that frankly are off the scale relative to what we had before. And we've done interviews on things like 3D cloning, people cloning animals. Well, there's a big piece in Time about one of the people we interviewed saying, no, they're going to be using this to save species. Some of the business models we're going to have to build are designed to save that type of business model, that type of species. So the infrastructure we put in place has got to be radically different. Old world assumptions can't apply to this new world dynamic, as Camille's implied, that people have got to radically take a whiteboard and rewrite the way they think about networking, the way they think about insight and data value, like telemetry data. I mean, telemetry data is unbelievably powerful. People just haven't worked out how to use it. Doesn't mean it's not powerful. They just have to work out how to use it. And that's what we're finding.
And the data is just lying fallow, not being used at all. And I was thinking, one of the people you've interviewed, and I remember this person, it was someone from USAA, the insurance company, who was saying you've got to be as much digital on the inside as the outside. So I think there's a lot of people being found out. There's a lot of digital transformation, sort of lipstick on a pig type of activity. Am I being a bit rude? Possibly. But I think people are being found out, and the investment has got to change, and it's got to be from within as well as outside. And I think that means actually a lot of flexibility, simplification of your environment, and control. And people just don't have the control they should of their digital environment. And that's a big worry for enterprises I've spoken to, certainly. I hope I'm making sense, but that's what comes to mind.
100%. And one of the key parts of this transition has just been, as you said, everyday life. And one of the unique things about Extreme, we have this saying that every day is game day. And Michael, I know you've done a lot of research, a lot of work for a lot of the sports leagues. One of our customers, the NFL, actually starts playing. It'll be they'll be in swing as Connect
full
takes
swing
place.
in the season.
Full swing. We've got several of our MLB customers. We've got soccer customers. share a little bit about kind of your view on how this is going to change sports, not only for the players, not only for the front office, but for us as fans.
So sports is actually a perfect example of what we call moments, is that the new environment is about managing each of these moments that Camille talks about: extraordinary levels of service, exceptional types of experience. Well, look, a game has boundaries: time, amount of points scored, amount of batters out, whatever, right? So those are very intense moments. You multiply that by everybody in a stadium, everybody has their own moment. So things like telemetry data could actually be vital ways to keep these franchises economically going. When we all eventually get back into a stadium, knowing where Wes is versus Camille may affect the type of marketing we want to do to Wes or Camille literally in that moment. And sports franchises are understanding in a 60-minute game over 3 hours, there are maybe 20 opportunities to sell to each of you, but those 20 opportunities are really different. Julio Jones has a touchdown, or Tom Brady gets sacked. Very different moments for buying stuff, and sports gets moments for customers, for actually even athletes, and even the TV viewing audience is better than anywhere else. The NFL, Major League Soccer, Major League Baseball, these are remarkable examples of digitally transforming environments right in front of us. You can see them transforming literally second to second. I think watching how they're managing. Yeah, shoot.
Sorry to interrupt. I was going to say, to put in a word for the beautiful game of football, the proper football. I was just thinking about the stadium in Barcelona has been wired with all of these cameras and these just crazy angles that you normally, even if you were sitting in the stadium, would not be able to understand these angles. But you can be at home and have a wonderful sporting experience. Heck, you can't be in a stadium today, but technology is enabling new types of value. And I suppose that's the exciting thing, that we're seeing, delivery on that being made possible. And that's some of the decision making that's been accelerated, I think, in a positive way through COVID. Right, Michael?
Well, yeah, and think about the maths, right? 60,000 people in a stadium, 5 million people at home, right? If you have 5% of those 5 million people at home buying those services, technically, you may not need the revenue in the stadium from attendees. And I think franchises are going, how do I build secondary, tertiary revenue streams that aren't dependent on people turning up in the stadium? And that's a really big deal for every sport for all over the world right now. That's a problem that we never thought about, but now all of a sudden becomes substitutional moments of value that organizations need to extract value from. And that requires really high quality data.
You need to have a very good business case. We can't do this on faith anymore. I suppose one of the things about COVID, to my mind, is I see less will to experiment, but a more of a joined up business case is required. So in a way, that's sad that there's going to be less experimentation, but at the same time, people are going to make decisions faster. Enterprises want snackability. They want an immediate response. I suspect, I've got a suspicion here that Wes is a fan of the Chicago Cubs, because I noticed they were one of the people, they're going to be at this fabulous event, and you would have to be, live on faith with the Chicago Cubs, because they had a dry spell of 107 years. And I used to live in Chicago during that dry spell. And I used to, be with a fan of the Chicago Cubs, and we would go over to Wrigley Field, and every time it was just a terrible story, but we kept the faith. But my God, it took 107 years. We don't have the leisure of that time anymore. We need to act quickly, as much as I may love the Cubs.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway.
So I think what's been interesting to me, and I'll shift this back to an enterprise scenario, is the return to sports is part of getting back to normalcy, just like getting the kids back into school, whether it be university or K through 12. And in many ways, a sports environment is a microcosm of a number of verticals. I mean, you've got a healthcare element, you've got a hospitality element, you've got a field services element, you've got a retail contact center element. So all those things, I think, have been quickly rethought over the last 6 months and how we apply it other places. So when you think about, the devices that the NFL players are wearing to make sure they're properly separated, when you think about cashless transactions in the stadiums, whether it's proper football or, American football or heathen football or whatever you might want to prefer to call it there, Camille. But there's so much advancement. The heat sensors, anything to really make that fan experience, player experience unique is pretty important. Then when you look at what the teams are doing, whether it be the basketball league, and baseball, or NFL with expanding like who they call on to make sure they've got players in this environment. So the role of analytics, all of this has changed pretty rapidly. And as you said, it's got to pay out pretty quickly. But I think every one of those scenarios can apply to what takes place in a hospital, a manufacturing environment. And I think that's been, to me, the beautiful thing of what's taken place over the last 6 months is we've tried to get back to normalcy, applying it other
But
places.
you know, the word we haven't used and we've got to use is real time. Real time, because we need data in real time. My father was a CIO, but of course in those days, I'm terribly ancient, he was called a Chief Data Processing Officer. And what that actually meant is he looked at data after the fact, not in real time. But now we need that data in real time. We cannot wait to make those decisions about the safety. Has someone got a temperature? By the way, people who have invested in building technology, 90% of that building data is not used. And we need that. People in the building, moving around, the temperature, all of that. We need joined up thinking and real-time decisions, right? And that's
Michael,
what digital transformation, I think, is about. Sorry.
No, it's a great point. I mean, this data that's going unused, Michael, why aren't people using this data? Why do people
Well, so there's a couple of reasons why it happens. First of all, we see things as journeys, right? Which is not life. Life is a Pachinko machine, hundreds of thousands of moments that are connected, right? So we forget, okay, we've always looked for this form of data vertically, but actually there are new streams of data coming in and new themes of ideas going down on top of them that cover each moment. So if you think about sport is a collection of thousands and thousands of moments. Going to a hospital is a collection of thousands of moments. And one thing we tell clients to do is get in a virtual room right now and plot all those moments that matter and then say, what's the data we need? Once you start understanding the moments, then you realize how much data you're just letting fall out of the system. It's like a bucket made of paper, right? Once this stuff leaves the system, it actually isn't often as of value. It's only in value as it's in the bucket. So understanding this moment matter data model will let you probably extract 30% more value immediately. Telemetry data is, to me, crazy. It's the most amazing form of information in a government building, in a healthcare, in worksite safety, right? On the industrial edge, the intelligent edge. It's as if we are walking over fields of oil saying, oh, the stuff's black. No, this can actually fuel the engine going forward in a far more efficient way. So instead of being a chief technology officer or data officer working on old PDP 11s or VAXs, what you become is a moments officer. Your job is to extricate as much value from every moment of data you get for your organization, operationally, sales-wise, marketing, customer-wise. It's just incredible how much is out there that could be used, and we're just walking over it. It's like you can't see the wood for the trees or the trees for the wood, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I mean, Michael, I love that. But here's what scares me today is, so recently I asked some CIOs, how does your team spend its time? And they said 70% of my team's time is spent on, routine moves, adds and changes, and just troubleshooting and administration. And I've asked that question many years. I've asked that question 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and it was the same answer. That is an outrage, considering actually, and there are two ways of looking at it. One, they've been very successful considering how more complex the environment is with those connected devices, with the fact that we've got, bring your own device, with the real complexity that IT teams have got to deal with. But it's not getting any easier. And if enterprises, some of their most valuable intellectual resources are doing administrative work, this is insane. And that's why I would say, unless anyone that wants to do business with you is not talking, if they're not talking about machine learning or artificial, intelligence, you should not be doing business with them, quite frankly. Their job is, you're not supposed to be the administrator of technology they have sold to you. It's an outrage. This is the situation that so many enterprises are dealing with today. Sorry, that's me on my soapbox.
No, it's fine. I mean, one of the tricks we've found in the sports franchises was to speak to a CIO and say, look, why don't you create 100 moments of amazing from the data you've got and present them to businesses? Stick them on a wall and say, right, you guys aren't telling me that some of these aren't valuable. I think you have to start using that network knowledge to refeed the thinking processes up the food chain. Otherwise, we're going to use very bright people to do very mundane things on a very ongoing basis. But you have to take charge of your own future. And that 100 moments of amazing completely encourages team to reinvest in a Wi-Fi system they hadn't used before, because they recognize the value of telemetry data. Silly stuff like, we didn't know that one of these, donut stands on a Sunday was being underutilized because it was too far away from the entry. They moved it 50 yards, was maxed out by half time. Silly stuff like that is all driven by telemetry data. And I think that's really the network manager's network responsibility to say, here are 100 things we found about our data. Right, choose the 10 that make a difference. Now let's go off and challenge them. It's not to be a victim of data, but to be the valiant knight that finds where the data value is and then says, right, let's go and find it. Because it's tough to change culture. It's tough to change process, even in a crisis. And you're right, Camille, a lot of people have dug in, about a third of them have dug in and gone, we're just going to try and breathe less oxygen and survive this, which won't be a good strategy.
So I love this dialogue. I mean, it's really exciting for me to hear you guys talk about unlocking this power of data that's kind of been hidden, or as Camille talked about it being fallow. Camille, you've written a lot over the last couple of months about network as a service, as a service rising, the interest in those, and certainly we've seen the results from people in other kind of real-time collaboration categories post incredible kind of usage and license usage numbers over the last couple of months. Networks as a service, does that move start to simplify, start to create time to give access to examine that data so that technology decision maker can go have a discussion with the business decision maker? Is there a linkage that can be made there at all?
Well, a few things to say. One, it's not just one decision maker. There are so many, and if you can actually provide a platform where you can analyze the data, then those insights can be shared and interpreted so much more easily across an organization. And let's not forget that enterprises larger and smaller and more increasingly sophisticated digital buyers. I do not buy the story that, oh well, people will not configure this complex technology service because they're, I don't know, 45, 50 and they're not comfortable with doing it, and they'd have no experience. This is nonsense, absolute nonsense. So many other complex digital business services are being bought by people of different ages. It actually hides the reality that there are some lousy platforms out there amongst like network providers, and this is an awful statistic. I found recently that 75% of enterprises were complaining about their service provider's portal. It was so lousy. And then they complained that people aren't buying more digital services. Is the problem the service or the platform here? Let's point the finger in the right direction, because the enterprise customer is no fool, and is actually, the standards are even higher in this COVID world, right? So things have to change.
That's a pretty interesting perspective. So really, it's not just about the product, it's about the end-to-end, really making it effortless, that whole experience, start to finish, the portal, the back-end support. That, Michael, are you seeing the similar dynamic on the customers you spend time with?
Camille's extremely articulate about this. I think, yes, with two angles. I think people fall into three camps. They either say, we're going to do the same as we've done before and breathe less oxygen, cut OPEX, cut CAPEX, and try and get out to either a U or a V recovery. That's about 1/3 of the audience. You're seeing that China, US, elsewhere. About another third go, yeah, we're going to tinker a little bit. We're going to play around a touch. Hopefully we can be nimble and agile, but we don't really have a strategy. The third group, which runs at about 35%, say, no, we know this is a moment for transformation. It's shaken us what's happening. We've realized, if you model this out 1, 2, 3 years, we either sink or we really, really swim. So we've chosen this as a moment to swim. And the organizations that have really chosen this as a moment to swim, not wave and drown, are absolutely taking this strategy of, we don't believe that the standards set before were right. We're examining every platform, because what will be the new world will need different requirements. And I completely agree with Camille about the age thing. I mean, look, the only area where we've seen age make a difference is self-drive cars. Millennials are infinitely more comfortable with the car's ability to drive than baby boomers. But that's after 40 years or 50 years of driving. I'm not going to let go of control. So it's very dangerous to drop people into buckets. But that we're going to thrive bucket is absolutely where people need to be heading. Re-examine platform, re-examine suppliers, but re-examine outputs and outcomes. They know that we cannot get to the new world by doing what we've done before and expect different results. And it sounds trite and it's not big enough for a book, but the reality is those are the companies that are going to thrive in this process.
That's pretty good advice in terms of segmenting the market and the audience. As a parting thought from you, Michael, Camille, he laid out kind of three different audiences: those that see a chance to prosper, those that are going to struggle, and those that are going to barely hang on to survive, depending on their strategy. We talked about a lot here: transition to cloud, as a service, AI, ML. What's kind of your parting advice for our audience today?
I was talking to someone who's trying to change the business in a transportation company, 138-year-old company. And his advice was, run swiftly, run lean with a very small team, and carry a hammer, is what he said. This was a Finnish guy, and I said, okay, so this is, something out of Norse mythology or something like that. But anyway, break the silos is what he meant. Don't accept borders. As simple, even borders as simple as, to go to technology, between the LAN and the WAN. Don't accept that to be different silos. They're all one of the same. It's all about delivering experience. So, carry that hammer and smash. Don't be too scared to smash. I thought that was an interesting expression from this gentleman I spoke to.
That's a pretty great expression and pretty good parting advice. For our audience, I'd really encourage you to keep track of the research that Camille is doing and the team at Omdia is doing on all of this work, the transition, what's the impact of 5G, the transition to the cloud, how that takes place, as a service transitions, really some seminal work. We'll have access to their latest report on what happens in a post-COVID world and how you make technology decisions. So you can certainly follow her online. She's got a great following. And for Michael, same thing. You can have access to a lot of what he does online. He's got his regular podcast that he does on the future and focus with Forbes, which is a great tool. For me, it's been a gift to have both of you here on stage with us today at Connect to share your insights. It always sounds smart when you put two British people on a panel, so I doubled down on that and used that with both of you. So thank you for sharing your wisdom and sounding smart in doing so. And to those of you that are watching, hopefully you've enjoyed this, gotten something out of it. If you take one thing away, move and move fast. That's the name of the game. So thanks for your time today, folks.
Been a pleasure.